In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 240 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is relationships. Our quote of the day comes to us from Greg Mortensen. Slow down and make building relationships as important as building projects. Today's episode is sponsored by the good people over at West Fair Communications, who publish the Westchester County Business Journal and the Fairfield County Business Journal. These newspapers do a wonderful job in covering all aspects of the business world within two of the most influential markets in the New York metropolitan area. You can also take advantage of their daily news feeds, which keep track on the companies and thought leaders in these important regions. For more information, take a look at www.westfaironline.com. Trust me, once you start reading, you won't quit. I'm really excited to bring you today's episode. When I began reading his new book, Start With Your People, I knew I had to get Brian Dixon on our show. What I didn't know then was that he and I would immediately connect and he would deliver such incredible things to our show. It was after he performed his 360-degree assessment where both his business and his personal life took off. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Brian, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Chris, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Really excited to talk with you today.
Awesome. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
Of course I am. Let's do it.
So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up. And I wanted to ask if you had either a personal story that you overcame something or a time in life that you were really challenged and you could have given up and given in, but you didn't.
Absolutely. Freshman year of college, I'm going to this little college in Manitoba, Canada, which is like middle of nowhere, and I was in a car accident. There was a freak rainstorm, turned into ice. It was impossible to stop. And we skidded right onto the highway, got hit by another driver who couldn't stop going highway speed, T-boned, our car. I leaned over to the middle of the car, got hit right on my hip, crushed the door, 26 breaks in my hip and my pelvis. And I thought I was going to die, and actually I lived through it. And I had three doctors, Chris. Three doctors tell me I would never walk again. And I played basketball in college. I was very athletic, really active person. And that was a moment. I had a chance right there to say, I give up. I'll be in a wheelchair my whole life, or to push through. And we actually had an opportunity to talk to a well-renowned orthopedic surgeon, and he had us sign all kinds of paperwork saying experimental surgery probably won't work, probably mess you up even more. But my parents and I decided to go for it. And he worked on me for 5.5 hours, stitched me back together. And 11 days later, I took my first step. And since then, I've done triathlons, about 5 marathons, run almost every day. And I think, even though it hurts, even though there's still the throbbing pain and the arthritis and all the things that come with a big accident like that, it's just a reminder that every day we have a choice if we're going to really show up or if we're going to give up.
I love that show up or give up. I had no idea about your story in regards to that, but for our listeners, just want to reiterate 26 breaks, and the doctor said he would never walk again, and 11 days later, Brian was up and walking. So I love that, Brian, and I wanted to just ask you quick, if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a clarity coach. I help entrepreneurs, speakers, authors, people with a message get clear on who's their audience, what's the message they want to share, and then what are their products? What do you offer to your audience? So those are the 3 legs of the stool of an online business: audience, message, and products. So whether you're a coach, whether you're a speaker, whether you dreamed about starting a side hustle, I help people get clarity when it comes to really figuring out those three aspects of their business.
Where were you about 10 years ago?
Yeah, 10 years ago, having our first kid. My oldest kid is turning 10. So, man, 10 years ago, man, I was trying to figure it out myself. So, there's joy in the journey. And I wish I had a time machine, Chris, because I wish I knew what I wish I knew 10 years ago what I know now. And I'm sure the same's true for you as well, right?
I love that. I could not agree more.
Yeah.
But I love what you touched on is it's the joy in the journey. And I think so many people focus or fixate on that end result. And I don't want to ever discourage anybody from not having goals and objectives. But I think so many of the amazing guests we've had have shared that almost word for word verbatim is it's what happens along the journey, the ups, the downs, the good, the bad, the challenging. And I think it's what challenges us to the extent of where we are today. And I definitely wish I would have known 10 years ago what I know today. And the only trade-off to that would I have listened to the same way that I would today?
Oh, well, I know I wouldn't have, I mean, that's part of the story of my book, Start With Your People, is at the beginning, I tell a story about a 360 assessment when I asked people anonymously, what do you actually think of me? And I don't know who said what, so they could be completely honest. And when the feedback came back, there was a lot of good stuff, but when the negative feedback said, Brian puts projects over people, man, it hit me like a punch in the gut, and I wish I knew then how I was pushing people so hard that I was burning relationships. And I had to learn the hard way by asking people for their feedback. So I think all of us, we have blind spots. I was talking to my business coach the other day because good coaches hire coaches, right? So I have a coach and he lays into me, and he was saying to me the other day, Brian, blind spots are temporary because as soon as you recognize a blind spot, now you're aware of it. You can decide if you're going to look at it or not, but it's there. It's no longer a blind spot. So each of us have these blind spots in our life. But once we're aware of it, now we have a choice to move forward and to deal with it. So I think we constantly have something we're working on. And instead of letting it discourage you, let it fuel you, let it fuel you to move forward.
No, I think that's so important. It's the burning desire inside of you to get you to the next level or get you past that hump. So wanted to ask you an interesting question I ask everybody is if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you use?
Oh, I love that question. I don't think I've ever gotten down to one word. The first one that comes to mind is integrity, because I think that's what it's all about. Integrity is being the same person wherever you are. Is what I say to you is the same thing I'll say after we get off the call about you. The way I treat my wife is the same way I'm going to talk about my wife to my buddies at the pub. The way that I talk to my kids is the same way, I talk about my kids. And I think so many business owners really struggle with the dual life, work-life balance is a myth. It's work-life integration. So, yeah, I just want to be the same person showing up, filled up for you as I do for my kids, as I do for my wife, as I do for my clients. So that's the first word that comes to mind.
I think that's a great word. And before we jump into your book, which I want to discuss for a minute, is I wanted to ask if there's anything that you're reading currently or possibly you've read something recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners.
I love Audible, so I'm pounding through audiobooks all the time. I went back to a classic, which is called Traction. So if you're especially if you're a business owner, there's this system called the EOS system, the Entrepreneur Operating System. It's by this guy, Gino Wickman. And so Gino, the first book there's a series of 4 books, but the first book's called Traction. It's basically like, how do you get off the hamster wheel of trying to grow your business? And the answer is you need 2. You need you as the visionary, and then you need an operator. He calls it an integrator. So I reread that book. I reread it with my team just recently, and it's just really rocking our business right now.
That's awesome. And I think it's really neat that you touched upon rereading a book, because so many of our guests over the last probably 20 to 30 episodes have touched on some type of rereading process, whether it's rereading a certain book every year, or a guest probably 6 months ago shared something really interesting, and he said he only reads about 3 to 5 books every year. And at first I kind of was shocked, but then he told me, he said, Chris, but I read those books 3 to 5 times each. And that's when I was like, wow. And you think about taking it to a new level. So got to jump into your book here. So I'm going to read the title. Let's start with your people, the daily decision that changes everything. And before we jumped on here, I kind of just told you a little bit about the show and the background. But what I absolutely loved about your book, and more importantly, what I can tell from having only known you a short time, is it's all about doing it for others and paying it forward. And at No Quit Living, we're all about paying it forward for others with zero expectations in return. And I wanted to just kind of ask you maybe a tough question, but how did you come up with that idea? And was it after that 360 assessment or possibly? Yeah. Okay.
That's what it was. I got so one of the things I do is I co-run a membership community for writers called Hope Writers. And so Hope Writers has really been growing over the last couple of years. And so, my business partner, she has an agent. And so the agent, was paying attention to the work I was doing. And she said, hey, I think you've got a book in you. You're kind of a marketing guy, but you've got a heart. And she's like, not a lot of marketing people have a heart. She's like, so you should write a book about that. And before I did, before I started that process, I'm like, I need to figure out, what is the thing that I'm really good at? What's my zone of genius? Other people have called it like your sweet spot. So I was working with this coach. And he said, if you want to take your life to the next level, do a 360 assessment. I'd never even heard of a 360 assessment, but like I was explaining before, it's this anonymous survey. People can take it without signing their name so they can really be honest, sometimes brutally honest. And that was part of the beginning process of that book idea, was like, let me just see what people are saying about me so I can kind of make sure it's included in the book. Chris, I had no idea that process was going to completely rock me. I thought the book's going to be about, connecting to your audience and growing your email list and that sort of thing. But when the feedback came back of, Brian puts projects over people, I had somebody say, when you have Brian's attention, it's like being in the sunshine. But when the project's over, it's like being cast into a shadow. And it was like, oh man, I can't live that way. That's not integrity. So I had to go on a journey, and it was a journey of apologizing. And I wasn't even going to include this in the book. It was like the book was a separate project, but I sent a first apology letter, email to somebody that I'm like, I didn't even know who took the survey, but I knew who I hurt. So I reached out and I said, listen, the way our project ended, I know I didn't show up. I wasn't the best version of myself, and I want to take responsibility. Will you forgive me? And the person wrote back, no problem, Brian. I'm like, oh, that was easy. Let me send another one. Same thing. No problem, Brian. Man, that was easy. And I kept sending these apology emails, and mostly it went well. And then this one person came to mind, and I'm like, I do not want to reach out to that person, because I knew what I had done wrong. I knew how I'd promised the moon and delivered, a lot less than that. And I think that's where this book started, is what does it mean to really show up for the people already in our life? Because so many business owners are thinking about the next, we're thinking about the next customer, the next big marketing plan, then, the next big launch. But there are people around you right now in your life who need you to turn towards them and say, what can I do to make your day? Like, how can I show up for you? And that's where this whole journey began for me.
That was filled with probably hours and hours of things that we could digest, and I say that with jest, but I mean that in such a positive way. But the one takeaway I have, and the word that just continued to flash in front of me is vulnerability, and I think Brene Brown has taken this word to a whole new level, and I think it's an amazing word. And a good friend of mine, Lucas Mack, has an awesome show, and he talks about it's titled The Vulnerable Hero. And I think what people miss is how important it is to be vulnerable. And I think the one thing that I didn't hear from you is I messed up, I was bad. What I actually heard is I needed to, but more importantly, I wanted to make it right. And I think that's the most amazing part I took from what you just shared with us. But the coolest part was that you did this assessment, and then you decided to reach out to people. And it's very easy to tell a spouse or a friend or a coworker, there's people I should apologize to, or, I kind of messed up on this. So many people say that, and I know I've said it in the past, but there's a difference of one of the things we stress here at No Quit Living is the action, and you went ahead and did it. So I got to ask you, why is it that there was that choice of maybe someday, not sure, of then going ahead and actually doing it? What is it that took you to the next level of actually taking action, and not only that, but continuing to reach out to those people?
Oh man, that's such a good question. And it keeps going. Like I just reached out to somebody on Friday. Okay, so we're recording this on a Monday. So just a couple days ago, I sent a text message to somebody who, misunderstandings happening in business. I knew she was kind of mad at me. Like, honestly, I just was like, and I was justified, like she involved an attorney. Like it was an ugly situation. And that was a few months ago. And now, like, we're both kind of living our lives. And I'm sure she's still mad about the situation. And I'm still mad about the situation, And it just hit me. I mean, I'm a person of faith. So I'm gonna blame God, just be like, I think God was like working on my heart. But even if you're not a person of faith, like, you just still know the right thing to do, And the right thing to do in that moment was to reach out to this lady I'm thinking about right now and say, hey, and this is my text message to her on Friday. I'm like, I know it's out of the blue. I know it's been a long time. I just feel bad about the way things ended with us. Like, see, I didn't even apologize because I still don't feel like I did anything wrong. But I said, I feel bad about the way things ended with us, and I'm cheering for your success. That's what I said. I'm cheering for your success. And she writes me back 5 minutes later and she says, thanks so much. I feel the same way. I'm cheering for your success too. She didn't apologize. I didn't apologize because I don't know. Maybe we will one day, but it's like the hardest thing to do often is the right thing to do, and I want to live in such a way. Here's the thing. I want to live in such a way when I walk into a room, whether it's at a conference or it's at a gym or it's in a restaurant, wherever I happen to walk into, anybody sitting in there, anybody in that room, I don't want them to go, oh, man, you see Brian Dixon over there? That guy's full of crap. That guy right there, let me tell you about him. That guy right there, he burnt me. Or that guy right there, he doesn't keep his word. And so even if I feel justified in the way I acted, I know that by doing what I can to make it right. Now, I can't change everybody's mind. I can't change everybody's opinion. But what I can do is I can take that extra step and try to live at peace. And you just never know how that's going to affect somebody.
Wow. You keep on delivering these bombs of just powerful information. And I think the really amazing thing about that story is that text, you have no idea what impact that had, and not taking this woman, because obviously she responded in a positive way. But for our listeners out there, that have thought about picking up the phone and making a call or leaving a voicemail or sending a text message, you have no idea what that person, A, is going through, but B, what a positive impact you could have just by reaching out. And I think the cool thing about what you shared is that you didn't feel you were wrong. So instead of giving a fake or a not real authentic apology, you responded a different way, said, hey, I'm cheering for your success. And she responded 5 minutes later and in essence said the same thing. And I think that's amazing, because instead of you sending a fake apology and her responding, oh yeah, Brian, I'm sorry too, and she knows that it's not real, but the fact that you reached out and you said, I didn't like how things ended, but I'm cheering for you. I think that's so powerful, because words are amazing. And a friend of mine a couple years ago talked about, you can't take words back and you can't, take things back. But the other component to that is you can't, say words that you wish you had done 3 or 4 or 5 years ago and say, I wish I did this, because you can't do it then. So for our listeners, if there's anybody you want to reach out to, go ahead today and like Brian said before, and like Brian did, just take action and don't think about it, but do it.
It's so true. I was working with this coach the other day, and he says to me, 2019, when we're recording this, like, relationships don't ever end. Like, think about that, right? They never end, because we're connected. We're connected through LinkedIn or through Facebook or whatever. We're connected through our reputation. Like, even after we die, like, that relationship still continues. They'll still have an opinion about us. They'll still have these memories about us. And what he was saying to me was, many people seek closure. Like, I want to close things, but he said it's not really closing, it's completion. And as we move forward in our business, there's a lot of incomplete agreements, an incomplete agreement. And what happens is it leads to misunderstanding. It leads to this feeling of like being let down. And I want to seek completion in the agreements, because what I absolutely believe is you only have so much attention. And I want to give 100% of my attention to whatever I happen to be doing at the time. And so all these, not completed agreements, I need to close them. Not close them. I need to complete them. So reaching out to somebody, failed business from 3 or 4 years ago, and say, hey man, let's hop on the phone real quick. I've got a new opportunity I want to talk to you about. That's a great way to do it. I got a new opportunity. Person says, okay, cool. Let's hop on the phone. You hop on the phone, or you do like a Zoom call or a Skype call, and you say, I was thinking about our business and how it didn't go well. And listen, I just want to let's just tie a bow on that. Let's just complete that. Are we good? And that person might say, you know what, actually, we're not good, because I've kind of been mad about it for a while. And you say, you know what, let me take responsibility. I'm sorry for that. The healing that comes from that, and like you were saying, Chris, you never know what that person's going through. Maybe they lost a parent recently. Maybe, their significant other just left them. Maybe something is going on with their kid. You just don't know. And so I just have to trust that, I have an opportunity to speak life into somebody, because there's death all around us. There's people cutting you off on the highway. There's people saying negative things on social. There's relationships that are ending. So what if I were a healer? What if I were somebody in their life that helped move things forward instead of pull things back? What would that do for them today?
I loved how you touched on the word completion versus closure. And I think what I would kind of give the analogy is it's like writing a book. And if you close something, it's done, completed. So you close it, it's gone almost forever. But if you complete a chapter, you can always come back to that, for example, business relationship or friendship, where you say, you know what, we're completing this one chapter, but it doesn't mean the book's over. It means that, chapter 7 is done, but maybe we come back and together we'll reappear in chapter 10, or I'll bring you back for the conclusion. And I think like what you touched on with social media is there's always opportunities to stay connected with people. And I think just being vulnerable and going back. But I think, what your book is all about, and clearly what you're about, is it's all about relationships. It's about, do you care about that person? Does that person care about you? And I think the interesting thing that I've realized in my life over the past couple of years is that people come in and out of your life, and as long as you're open and you allow, for example, that other chapter down the road potentially, I think you never, in essence, close something, and you never want to close. Now, obviously, some relationships and partnerships, must come to an end, but for those listening is, think about those people, those situations that maybe you want to reconnect with at some point, but do it honestly and do it vulnerably from a place of friendship and a place of care.
Man, that's so good. And that's what it means to live a no-quit life. A no-quit life means I'm not going to give up on somebody. Even if they weren't ready to invest in my business, they weren't ready to sign up for my, product or my service or whatever, I'm not giving up on them. And it's really easy to burn through relationships, especially if you're in sales or in marketing or anything like that. It's really easy just to go, you know what, they said no, screw them, forget them. But in reality, you're going to see them again. You'll see them at your kid's birthday party in 3 years from now. And you'll be like, oh man, I hate the way I handled that situation. So we're talking about bridge repair. What about bridge building? What if you could live a life where all you're doing is building bridges, you're not burning them? That's what I'm trying to do now, because I had the realization that I had burned all these bridges and I'm still holding the lighter in my hand. A, put down the lighter, but B, take out a hammer. How can I help build these relationships? And so one of the things I talk about in the book is taking, these personality tests, Strength Finder, Enneagram, love languages, knowing who you are, knowing how you show up for people, and then being so self-aware that you can say to them, you know what, before I respond, here's how I often deal with the situation. I often, what I'm thinking about right now is I'm thinking about results, because I want to crush it for you. I just want to show up and I want to get your results, but you need to know that because I'm so focused on results, sometimes I don't take the time to check in and see how you're feeling. And I just want you to know from the beginning, I'm not trying to be a jerk. I'm not trying to do it in a mean way. It's just, I get so excited about results that sometimes I step over people's feelings. So listen, I want to give you permission. If you see me doing that, please let me know. Just like raise your hand and be like, Brian, slow down. And code to when you say slow down to Brian, what that means is you're being a little bit of a jerk right now, or you're being a little too focused on results, and I don't feel included. That's my issue, you know? And so me giving my team, me giving my friends, me giving my family permission to say, Brian, slow down a little bit. It's not out of weakness. It's actually out of empowerment. And that's what it means to really live a no-quit life.
I love that. And the thing that I took from that too is there's a very significant difference of having the opportunity every day to lift people up as opposed to tearing them down. And I think so many people in today's day and age always want to attack and knock people as opposed to build them up. And I think that's the thing for me, having 3 young kids. I always try to see, not only with them but in their daily interaction with teams and schools, who are those people in their lives that are always inspiring them and building them up. And a lot of times it's teachers, coaches, but every now and then you get a friend where you can see that it comes from their parents and you say, wow, they're all about building people up as opposed to bringing them down.
Oh man, I love that. We were at a fundraiser the other night, and there's like this, nonprofit kind of ministry thing I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina. So it's for like refugee families, like literally families that have escaped like war, and they get shipped to Charlotte, North Carolina, and they're living in this like basic ghetto. Like it's just like a big apartment building that's like run down, and so this guy, he'd been in and out of prison, he turned his life around and he's like, man, I want to give back. What do I do? And he loves soccer. So he started this thing where he just started playing soccer at this at this project or whatever, like on Sunday nights. And so it started raising money, became an official thing. They built a field across the street. And now every single night of the week, they've got leagues of these kids who they can't afford shoes. They can't afford anything. They got no money at all. And he's created this whole community. And so I went at this fundraiser thing and they play the video. This a few weeks ago, they play the video. And at the end of the game, the kids are amazing because they're from all over the world and they play soccer, so they just completely demolish this other team, this local team. And at the end of it, as they're like shaking hands like they all do, they gather around in a circle. They ask the other team to join them and they pray for the other team. Like competitors are praying for each other. And again, if you're not a person of faith, no problem. Just like, what can I do and encourage you? How can I speak a word that lifts you up? So, even in business, we're not really competing with anybody, we're collaborating with people. So I think it's just a matter of switching your focus because it's so much more fun to do it with people, right? It's so much more fun to be part of the same team.
That's an amazing story. And I think, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're a person of faith or not. You can, quote unquote, pray for people in different ways. And that's something that I'm very, very passionate about, because I think in today's day and age, unfortunately, 2 things that people shun against are, unfortunately, politics and religion. And I don't want to talk politics or religion with anybody, but right. The reality is, and I think it's awesome how you said that, is faith doesn't have to be going to a church or a temple or praying to a certain thing. It can just be literally saying a prayer for somebody where someone's mother or grandfather is sick. It doesn't mean becoming one with God or those type of things. You could just say, hey, I wanted to say a prayer today for Jennifer's grandmother. Hopefully she pulls through, and I just want her to know that I'm thinking about it. Something simple like that. But I got to change lanes for a second here. And one of the questions that I didn't ask you before, but we're really passionate about, is the importance of a morning routine. And I was curious if you have a morning routine that you swear by.
Oh, of course. That's the difference right there. You want to know what, if you're struggling right now, it's because you're not waking up early enough. That's the one thing I can point to. Every colleague in my world who's crushing it, they wake up earlier than anybody else they know. It's the secret. That's it right there. My friend and mentor, Dan Miller, he calls it the rudder of the day. That first hour in the morning, others have called it, the miracle morning or the power hour. So yeah, this morning I was up at 4:30 4:30 to 5:30 is journal, it's prayer, it's quiet, it's meditation. I've got this little process I go through, but just with an open journal and a pen. 4:31, man, I'm there on one of the couches downstairs, glass of water for an hour. And when I first started a few years ago, it was a struggle. But now, like, the hour is not long enough, you know? It's not long enough because I'm getting business ideas. I'm constantly like learning new things about who I need to apologize to, who I need to show up for, who I need to reach out to. So, man, I fill 3 or 4 pages of like basically notes, like notes for the day. And then what I do at 5:30 when it's over, you know, when that power hour is over, then I look through those notes, and then I have my I use Mike Hyatt's full focus journal or full focus planner. So I take out the planner and I just translate the notes that I wrote down into action steps. Sometimes it's, you know, a couple of days later, so I'll turn to Thursday and I'll write down an action step. So now I process that. By that time, I wake up the kids, I serve them breakfast, get their school, you know, their lunch ready for the day, walk into the bus, and then I come home and it's an hour of workout. You know, it's cardio, it's lifting, it's running. And man, all that's done before 8 o'clock, you know? So by 8 o'clock, I feel like I've gotten more done than most people get done in a week. And we do that every single day, and you're going to see the compound effects.
I love that, and I appreciate you touching on that, because what I've realized is through this podcast, as I said earlier, I've had the opportunity of just interviewing some amazing people, and they all have something that works for them. And the reason I love that question about a morning routine that people swear by is there is not one specific thing that anybody could say, this is what you have to do, this is how you have to do it, and this is the exact time frame you need to do it. And I think for you, it's an hour of that time from 4:30 to 5:30 and getting your workout for an hour. And then, like you said, you're done at 8. And the one thing I want to stress very, very clearly to our listeners is this is not, you know, set it and forget it. This is not one way that works for everybody. You know, things change. And I'm sure along the way, you yourself tweak things and maybe you did things a little differently. But for our listeners that have not taken the time to actually look at a morning routine, I would recommend you just start small and start with something that you can handle. Start with something that you know you can do, because that's the other thing. I think so many people try to jump into these programs where it's, you know, 90 minutes of this or an hour and a half of this followed by 30 minutes of that, and all of a sudden it's that paralysis by overanalysis. So I'm glad you touched on that. But Dan Miller was also a guest on the show, and he's awesome.
Oh, I love it.
So before we wrap up here, I want to jump into something that I think is fun. It's what we call our hot seat questions, and the only request we have is you just spit out the first answer that comes to mind.
Love it. Let's do it.
All right. If you had one last meal, you could pick absolutely anything. What would you pick?
Really spicy curry.
Favorite sport?
Yeah. You know, I'm going to say soccer now, which is shocking, but I've been playing pickup game once a week, and it's been a blast.
Favorite team?
LSU Tigers.
Favorite smell?
Oh, my wife.
You get some extra credit there. All time favorite movie?
You know, so many people say Back to the Future, so I'm going to say my second favorite, which is Out of Sight with George Clooney and Jennifer Lopez. It's incredible. I love that movie.
Favorite quote?
Yeah, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I think that's credited to Jim Rohn.
That's a great quote. I talk about that all the time. Do you have a favorite singer, group, or band?
Oh, 100%. So many come to mind. You know, I'm really digging NF right now, the rapper. He's so motivational. And then, man, the Beatles are incredible. And I really love Switchfoot. I think Switchfoot's lyrics are just so freaking deep. You know, you just can listen to those albums over and over again and still find gold in there.
Do you have a favorite all-time book?
You know, I love The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. It's written in 1957. It's just as relevant today. It's
a great book. And then if you were stuck in a foxhole and you could pick one person to have your back, who would it be?
I'd bring my wife if she'd come with me, and if not, it would be one of my mastermind brothers, probably Henry or Jared.
That's awesome. And then wanted to ask you, what's the best way for our listeners not only to connect but follow, find out more about you, and then more importantly and most importantly, what's the best or easiest way for them to get a copy of your book?
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, the book's available on Amazon. I read it as well, so you can get it on Audible. The book's called Start With Your People. And then in terms of connecting with me, I found that Instagram is like the most transparent social media. So here's what I'd love you to do. Here's the one action step. If there's something I said today that you either have a question about or it inspired you, go find me on Instagram, send me a message, send me a DM. Just say, Brian, I heard you on No Quit Living, and here's what I got, or here's a question I have. And let's start a conversation, because I really believe it's about relationships to help you move forward.
I love that. And then last question, I wanted to ask if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners.
You know, what you're going through right now is going to be curriculum that you can teach to somebody in 3 years from now. That you can take the struggle you're facing right now and you'll be able to turn it around in 3 years from now, and you'll be able to say, this is how I overcame that if you're going through this right now. So look at it as training instead of as a trial.
That was very deep in an amazing way. So again, Brian, I wanted to say a very special thank you for not only being on our show, but what you shared with us. And for our listeners, definitely connect with Brian, check out his book, buy his book, or listen to his book on via audiobook. But please connect with him if you found something valuable. And Brian, thank you so much.
Chris, I'm honored. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to episode number 240. Brian Dixon is an awesome guy, and I love how after a horrific car accident in which a doctor told him he would never walk again, only 11 days later he proved that doctor wrong and took his first step. A common theme being spoken about today is the infamous work-life balance. Brian believes that to be a myth, and instead he believes in work-life integration. When we touched upon a morning routine, Brian was adamant that waking up early is not only his secret, but the secret to getting ahead in life and both maximizing your day as well as your time. Brian shared how the hardest thing to do is often the right thing to do. I absolutely love Brian's parting words, as they really hit me. Brian said that no matter what you're going through today, you can learn from it, and in 3 years you'll be able to teach it to someone else and to help them immensely. So I challenge you today, no matter what you're going through, no matter how hard or difficult it may seem, don't give up. It won't be easy, nor will it happen overnight, but you can do it. And in 3 years from now, you'll be able to pay it forward for someone else. So as you go for your greatness today, very simple, keep going. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.